The numbers of immigrant children being detained by U.S. authorities at the U.S.-Mexico border have dropped in recent months. But as Amna Nawaz reports, medical professionals continue to raise concerns about the harmful effects any detention can have on both the short and long-term health of these young people.
That's right, Judy. Medical doctors and child psychologists agree that the stress children endure during even short periods of detention poses very real risks, physically and emotionally. Dr. Alan Shapiro is a clinical professor in pediatrics at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and co-founder of Terra Firma. That's a group that promotes access to health care and other services for immigrant children. He's also part of a group of physicians meeting with lawmakers on the subject. Dr. Shapiro, welcome to the NewsHour.
Thank you for inviting me.
Let's start with where migrant children would first be taken into custody, along some of these Border Patrol detention and processing centers. You're a child welfare expert. From your perspective, can children safely be held there?
Well, the short answer to that is no. And you know, what's so important for everyone to think about is that children arrive at our border who are traumatized from violence that they've experienced in their home community, an arduous journey, thousands of miles that they took to get to the U.S. border. So they're traumatized and they're stressed. And when you think about where would you want to put a child like that, you don't want to put a child in a freezing cold cell or in a warehouse that's filled with cages, and that doesn't have the right mix of staff to actually take care of them. Really, these processing stations are the worst and the last place you'd ever want to put a child.
You know, I should say I've spent time in some of those facilities, and Border Patrol officers will be the first to tell you we are not equipped to handle children here.
Absolutely.
These are cramped, windowless, cell-like areas. But explain to us, because we talk about this a lot, what exactly is it that's harmful to children? What's happening in a child's mind, to their emotional, physical well-being when they're held in these kind of facilities, even for short periods of time?
Right. So the facility I went to is Ursula in McAllen, Texas. There were 1,000 people in cages in that facility. There were no parents that were there for children. There was no one to help mitigate that stress. Plus, the conditions themselves in detention are harmful to children, which unfortunately is why that has contributed to the death of some children in the past year. They do not have medical facilities for children. They do not have proper food. The temperatures are freezing cold, and they're sleeping oftentimes on the floor. That is not a safe sanitary place for a child to be kept.
That stress that you mentioned, though, what kind of effect can that have on a child's well-being, both short-term or long-term? How does that manifest itself?
Right, so stress has both short-term and long-term effects on children. In the short term, what we see is children with regressive behavior. We might see a child that had mastered bedwetting and now all of a sudden is wetting themselves. Children who become withdrawn, children who stop speaking. All of the things that you see in a child with acute stress, we do see in these detention facilities. So what happens is when a child is under stress, their levels of hormones, stress hormones rise. So cortisol is one of those stress hormones that rise, right? That rise of stress hormones is there to protect them. That's that fight or flight experience that you have. Then we want those hormones to go down and for children to relax and then to go back to their baseline, and allows them to go on and once they feel safe. If a child is constantly feeling a danger, those stress hormones never go down. And that's what leads to long-term chronic medical problems, learning problems, developmental problems, and growth.
I mean, all of these detention centers are not exactly equal, and I wanted to ask you about one type of facility in particular. They're called family residential centers because obviously many of these children are actually detained with the parent or legal guardian with whom they arrived. I actually asked Homeland Security Acting Secretary Kevin McAleenan about some of those centers, about the care of children in those centers when he was here. Here's what he had to say.
These centers were purpose-built to house families during their immigration proceedings. Again, they have educational facilities, recreational, dining, medical, and they're appropriate settings for people to spend a period of time in while they go through an immigration proceedings.
Dr. Shapiro, administration officials say these are appropriate settings. They're campus-like facilities. What's your opinion? Are they appropriate for children?
So I've been to every existing family residential center, and I will say, I hate to put it this way, but he's dead wrong. And he's wrong from a child welfare perspective. These facilities are prison-like. Families are treated like prisoners. Parents are not allowed to freely parent their children in the way that they want to. The facilities are at the Berks Family Residential Center, where I've been. Children and women have flashlights shown in their face every 15 minutes to make sure they're sleeping in their bed. Disrupts their sleep. It scares them. I mean, that is not a facility that we would want our families to live in. You wouldn't want to live there. I wouldn't want to live there. We wouldn't want our families to live there. And most egregiously, they do not have the adequate mental health services that families need. We have to remember, detention itself is traumatizing. And that is why when I was in those facilities, I saw very regressive behavior in children. I saw teenagers that told me that they were suicidal. I saw parents that told me they were depressed and suicidal.
Well, let me ask you this, because the administration will say we have an immigration enforcement job to do. Some kind of detention for a matter of days, if not weeks, is necessary as we process who these families are, do background checks, etc. They also say these children have already suffered multiple traumas before they've even gotten here. This is a much better environment than the one they came from. What do you say to that?
First of all, trauma that these children are facing is compounded. So it's trauma after trauma. Just because you've been badly traumatized in the past doesn't mean that that trauma doesn't continue. And the more trauma you have, the worse your outcome is going to be. You're worse your mental health, you're worse your physical health. And remember, we're talking about children who are developing, who are learning. Every one of those traumas interferes with their growth, development, and learning.
So if you could suggest one step the administration could take today that would be in the best interests of these children, what would that be?
My recommendation would be to free those children, let them into the community and those families into the community as soon as possible. And what's very worrisome is that now the administration is recommending that children and these families are kept in long-term detention. I've seen firsthand with my own eyes what can happen to children.
Dr. Alan Shapiro, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.